Carlos just saved my life. I almost just recorded this whole thing muted. Howdy, thanks for joining me. This will be available on VOD as well, but I want to start live streaming them on a regular basis. I want to have some sort of consistent content week to week that I have an actual schedule for. So, I'm thinking Tuesdays or Wednesdays might be the best option. So I would do like Wednesdays at 7:30 or something every week. And the Movies with Jiro's podcast, I have a blast doing it. Here, I'll turn myself up a little bit. I love doing Movies with Jiro's, but it's a lot more difficult because it has to be sort of structured and it has to be, I don't know. I want to do live streaming, but I don't think video games is the way to do that. So anyway, I wanted to do this as sort of a weekly content. I'm gonna call it recaps with Giros for the time being. But I figured, you know what? I watch probably more movies than the average person. I, I really think that's true, and I might as well talk about these movies because I have all these thoughts of these movies that I'll see just on a whim, and they're not relevant or anything necessarily, but I could group them together. So recently, I actually did see some relevant movies that I want to talk about. Let me go ahead and switch over to this cam. Okay. So recently, I actually got the AMC A-list pass, which is like $23 a month, and it lets you watch um, 3 movies a week, which is basically unlimited movies. Because I don't know who in their right minds would go to the movie theater more than 3 times a week, but it's up to 3 times a week, and you can see any movie in any screen size uh, for free. As long as you pay that monthly fee. So probably gonna end up seeing a lot more newer movies that come out just because why not? I'm already paying for it. Yesterday I saw Free Guy, and the night before that I saw The Night House, and I think those would be 2 really good movies to start with. Hold on. Free Guy. Free Guy was. Oh, and I just want to make it clear before I start. I'm gonna talk about these movies spoiler free, so I don't want to turn away people that are interested in seeing these movies. So yeah, I'm gonna talk about them without talking about specific plot points because I think that's how I write my reviews on Letterboxd anyway. So yeah, let's go into Free Guy. Free Guy was very average in my opinion. Um, it I'd give it a hard 5, maybe a soft 6 out of 10. It's hard, it's tough because I think that it's a pretty competently well made movie. I don't think anything about it is super bad. This is a unique rating for me because I didn't rate this movie kind of low. 5 out of 10 is kind of low. I didn't rate it kind of low because I thought anything in it was bad necessarily. I rated it kind of low because I didn't think anything was particularly great. Um, it wasn't really that funny, which probably worked in its favor. In all honesty, I could see another version of this movie that was filled with really cringe humor that didn't work, whereas this is almost just like a light-hearted adventure movie. Um, and it's just average. Um, like I said in this review, the best part about the movie is that it it feels super accurate to actual video games. It it feels like the people that wrote this movie and made this movie played GTA 5 in their off time. I mean, there are scenes in this movie that are ripped straight out of like the garage in GTA 5 when you have all your cars lined up. Like it didn't have any like cringe terms or outdated terms. It didn't feel like it was written by someone that was like approximating video games. It's very, very clear that the production team and the writing team knew what they were talking about, and that helped a lot. If and I don't know, some people might not think about that, but that's the best part about this movie is that, and I'm not going to spoil anything about it, but the main plot device within it is actually somewhat interesting or somewhat accurate. Like nothing about it feels outright outlandish. And when things get kind of outlandish, it's addressed in a realistic way. So, if this scenario played out in the real world, I think it would play out very similarly to how it does in the movie. So it's got all of that working for it, where for a game about a video game character, um, it's pretty realistic. So take that as you will. If you like Ryan Reynolds, you'll like this movie enough to watch it once. I It's way too long. It's 2 hours and it felt like three. It's just way too long. Comedies and horrors don't need to be more than an hour and a half. They just don't. And dude, an hour into this movie, I was like, damn, we must be like wrapping this up soon. So it has that working against it for sure. And it made me realize Ryan Reynolds has this thing going where he like this movie really made me realize what his shtick is. Ryan Reynolds, his whole personality is like in every movie, I mean, is usually like he gets caught up in like dangerous things, but he's always like kind of like the innocent guy. You know what I mean? He's never a driving force, really. Um and he's never controversial. I guess you have Deadpool, which is kind of it's probably his best movie because it's the least like it fits that the least amount. I mean, it still has like his obviously his style, but this movie's like the epitome of Ryan Reynolds in my eyes. It's the guy that is doing the right things and is surrounded by bad people, and he's just the quirky guy along for the ride, making funny faces and yeah, a very clean personality. And this movie's the epitome of that. So take that as you will. I thought it was fine. I think it's definitely worth watching one time. I would not pay money to see this in theaters. I guess I kind of did pay to see it in theaters, so the joke's on me. The Night House. I saw this the day before. This movie was really good. It was really good. I've been watching horror movies a lot more recently. With Natalie, she loves horror movies, and she's kind of gotten me to enjoy them more because they're super easily digestible. Like a movie is never really trying to tell like um like a groundbreaking story. The best horror movies do tell groundbreaking stories because they can connect with you emotionally, but in general, a horror movie is the same thing as an action movie, right? The plot just needs to be serviceable enough to take you to interesting set pieces. You know what I mean? It's the same thing as action movies. As long as the plot is okay, and as long as the characters are likable, and as long as it's only an hour and a half, it's fine. It's a popcorn experience. It doesn't need to be. I'm streaming on YouTube. Well, I'm on YouTube. I'll send you the link. That's Natalie, if you couldn't tell. Um, Carlos, this would be a 7 out of 10. So I think you need to learn to read, buddy boy, or at least do math. But yeah, I would give the Night House a 7 out of 10. But I liked it, which you can't see here because my face cam is blocking it. But I gave it a heart. I think that it's a phenomenal movie. Well, not phenomenal. Hi, Natalie. You came just in time. Natalie loved this movie. I really enjoyed it as well, and I keep coming back to it in my head, which I think makes it like a really good movie. But yeah, it was great. It was just listen, I'm not saying it was like Hereditary level, but it's right off the bat you can tell that it's a really competently well-made movie. You know what I mean? Like from the first scene, from the first like camera shot, you can tell that like it's got good cinematography, it's got good sound design, it's got good direction, it's got good acting. Like it off the bat, you can just tell when a movie is like a real movie that's trying to be like artistic, and when a movie is just like no style, completely flat. And from the get-go, you can definitely tell that like someone cared about making this movie. And yeah, I don't know, it had the sound design was incredible. Like just, and being in a theater for a horror movie is where you really like appreciate sound design, and you appreciate like this the not, it's not just the music. Like yes, the music is a really important part, but when you watch a horror movie in either the theaters or with headphones like these, like with actual headphones on, you pick up on so much more sound design. There's a good horror movie will use tiny sounds to slowly build suspense, and a bad horror movie will just play like generic music the whole time. And 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 great sound design elevates a horror movie like a solid 1 or 2 out of 10, because it just unconsciously builds suspense. And when you can do that, and when you know that you can do that, you don't have to constantly engage the audience with shitty jump scares. When you watch a shitty horror movie, they don't know how to build suspense in a subtle way, and so they're scared to have a scene where a character is just looking through a box of old photographs, or when a character is just going downstairs to grab something to eat. And so a shitty horror movie will throw in like shitty fake out moments or jump scares or just stupid little things because they're scared that the audience will get bored. But when you have great sound design, you know that you can take a breather on those moments and just build suspense with subtle sound that's rising slowly in the background. And even if you're just watching it at home on your TV without headphones on, you subconsciously you still absorb that music and that tension, and your brain understands that something is coming. So yeah, this movie has A plus sound design. The acting is really good. It's mostly just one character acting the whole time, and she's great in it. And yeah, it's just super suspenseful, and it's more of a mystery than a horror. It's like a spooky mystery movie, um, and it works. You know, I think the ending could have used a little bit of work, but overall, the the spooky stuff tied in with the theme in a satisfying way. It had a good message to tell by the end of it, which is hard to do for a movie. Like the basic plot is like this woman's like significant other dies. Like that's the basic plot. I mean, you learn that scene one that her husband dies. That's the farthest I'll say for spoilers, but and that's just like a story that's been told a billion times, and you'd be really scared that it'd be cliche. But this movie manages to say something unique by the end of it, while also having moments that like actually scared me. Like there's one sequence about halfway through that is like genuinely terrifying, and there are other moments that made like the hair stand up on the back of my neck. So I definitely recommend it. Turn down all the lights, crank up the volume. Definitely go check out The Night House. No one's really talking about it. I feel like it seemed to have a limited release in theaters only, so it's not even, you can't even rent it yet. But from what I'm seeing, even here, 30% of people gave it an 8 out of 10. So I it's really interesting, and I would recommend checking it out. All right. Now we're getting into the garbage. Um, there's a lot of garbage that I watch with Natalie. Here's the thing about watching horror movies is you get a really good overview of different like types of movie. You know what I mean? Like I just got done talking about a horror movie that I think is right, not yeah, yeah, yeah. No, you're right, Natalie. Sorry. Um But yeah, like I just got done talking about a movie that is a horror movie and it had something really interesting. And now I'm going to talk about a movie that is like the complete opposite of it. That is just like the cookie cutter box office horror movie. Nothing interesting about it except for the premise alone. All right, man. Um, Horror is an interesting genre because, a lot of times people storming outside. I don't think you guys can hear that though. I've talked about this before, but most people, and I'm talking like 80 to 90% of people, most people only watch movies that are above average, like 6 out of 10 or above. And those people have a warped perspective on what is the average movie because they're approaching it from average for them. You know what I mean? If you only see popular movies that are in theaters, movies that people talk about, chances are those movies are 5 out of 10 or above. It's pretty rare that a movie that like everyone's talking about and is really popular. It's pretty rare that those movies are below a 5 out of 10. And when they are, people like really like pounce on that. It's like pretty because it is kind of rare to have like a movie that's that much of a flop. And so my point is that to these people, to 80 to 90% of people, their idea of an average movie is an average movie that they watch. And so for them, like an average movie is like a 6 or a 7 out of 10. But by definition an average is a 5. And so the only way that you can get an idea of what like true average is if you go out of your way to watch bad movies. And most people don't do that because why would you waste your time watching bad movies? But when you're interested in horror, you find yourself watching you find yourself watching bad movies. It happens way more often than like most genres, right? And like I'm not going to sit down and like watch a drama that's like below average. Like right, but we love watching them because they're still entertaining. Like I made the comparison earlier between horror and action. Like I would still be down to watch a crappy action movie, but I'd be more down to watch a crappy horror movie because it's still got like I don't know, that's just my taste personally, but there are comparisons to be made there. And I'm not going to watch a crappy drama because I don't want to watch people talk if and just be boring about it. I don't want to watch a crappy like there's really no other genre that I want to even bother watching like the crappy versions. So Escape Room is a good example of an average horror movie. And I feel like most people, I would bet that this is rated a little higher. Yeah, it's rated a little bit above that. The most common rating on Letterboxd is a 6 out of 10. I'd give it the 5 out of 10. It's just so cookie cutter. Like, I was talking about the Night House and how that movie has like a unique style and it has something unique to say, and you can tell that someone like cared about the movie from an artistic standpoint. You can tell that they not only had a message but they had a style. And this movie is just every studio horror movie. It's generic acting, generic characters, generic music, generic filming. From the first scene, you can just tell like this this could be a TV show on like ABC, and it would be effectively the same thing. And in like this movie, I don't even know if this movie's rated R because it easily could have been PG-13 because anytime someone dies, it's usually like off screen. So there's nothing like gory in it. Going into this movie, I thought it would be um like the modern like take on Saw because it's a very similar premise, right? It's a deadly escape room, right? Which is kind of what Saw is, Saw, you go room to room and you have to do something crazy to get out of that room or else you die. So it's a very similar concept. And I love the Saw movies. And when you take a step back and you look at Escape Room, the only thing that's good about it is the premise. And the more they talk about the premise, the more interesting it becomes. The set designs are really good. Like every time they go to a new room, it's very elaborate, and it's like you can't even tell if you're like in a room or not. The set designs are really well done, but it's just so boring. It's just there's no gruesome deaths. Honestly, as stupid as it sounds, if this movie got like really violent, I, it probably would be better. And I know that's kind of like a weird thing to say, but it's just really boring. It honestly really feels like an ABC show. Um, and the writing was straight garbage. Straight garbage. They could have gotten away with not doing super violent stuff if the writing was just a little bit better. But every line of dialogue, every joke is just so painfully bad that you end up not caring about any of the characters. You think they're all kind of stupid. And so when they die, you don't care. And at that point, you're just kind of watching the movie to watch it end. Yeah, like there might be like one scene or two scenes in the movie that they would have to cut to make it appropriate for the CW. And for a movie about killing innocent people, I don't know. It's just it sounds sadistic when I'm on this podcast or live show, whatever. It sounds sadistic when I'm advocating for violence in media, but if you're gonna tell a crappy story in the horror genre with crappy writing, the only way you can give that story a level of depth is if you have like dark violence in it. Because it's a cheap way to add gravity to a situation. You know what I mean? If you don't care about the characters, you at least care about like not watch you don't want to watch them brutalized because you don't like watching brutality, right? And so that like tricks your brain into thinking that like you care about the characters. You kind of have to have one or the other, you know what I mean? Like The Night House, the last movie we talked about, it wasn't a particularly violent movie. I can't think of anything in the movie that was violent really at all. But because the characters were good and the story was good, we didn't need that. We cared about what happened in a different way. So when you strip emotional resonance from characters and you strip the violence, you end up with just this flat nothing movie. What is this movie? You know what I mean? I don't know who it's appealing to. I don't. What rating is the Escape Room? No, I don't want the rating. I want PG. It's PG-13. Escape Room rated PG-13. It is PG-13, isn't it? Yeah, it's PG-13. So it's a PG-13 horror movie. There you go. There you go, dude. It's a PG-13 horror movie. What else do I need to say? It's literally, and that's the thing. Maybe is this movie just isn't, maybe, I honestly didn't realize it was PG-13, and that kind of puts things into perspective for me. Maybe this movie just isn't made for me. This movie is made for high schoolers. This movie is made for eighth graders through senior year of high school. That's what this movie is made for. It's made for kids that are 13 to 17 that can't go see a real horror movie, but they want to go see like a crazy little interesting. Wow, dude, this movie is the PG-13 Saw. Okay, that kind of puts a new spin on it. I still think it's a fucking boring movie. Oh yeah, dude, I've got my tickets already for Candyman for Sunday afternoon. And thanks for joining. As I was saying at the beginning of this, As I was saying, tweens. As I was saying at the beginning of this of this episode, Natalie and I bought the AMC A-List pass, which is 3 movies a week for $23 a month. So we've already gone to 2 movies this week. Going to a third on Sunday, obviously, and yeah. So I'm definitely interested in it. I thought the first one was just mids, but I really like that Jordan Peele's production company is producing the new one. I think he's the perfect match for a movie like that. So no, 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 no. Don't say it. Don't say it. Don't say it. Don't say it. um. All right. So I talked about Free Guy, Night House, Escape Room, 575 respectively. Fine movies. Now I'm gonna talk about real fucking masterpiece. This is why you guys all came here. Um, Freddy versus Jason. Can I get can I get an amen? No, dude, seriously, this movie was interesting. I probably only really vibe with this movie because I saw it a lot as a kid, which I kind of realized as I was watching this how much of it I remembered, which is kind of stupid because it's a really stupid movie. But I'm not gonna spend too long talking about this movie, but uh, this is the closest that we got to like the Avengers back in the day. This was the early 2000s, late 90s grunge version of like a cultural event. You know what I mean? Like I don't mean Avengers in terms of like superheroes. I'm not comparing these two characters to anyone on the Avengers, but this idea of like a big cinematic event where there's like this big crossover and like you're mixing audiences, or not even mixing audiences, but blending big stories. It doesn't happen often is what I'm saying. And before Marvel and before movies got good, back in the early 2000s there was a lot of garbage horror. It was so popular back then because it was so cheap, and it still is. You know, horror is the most profitable genre, so it's really cheap to pump out a horror movie, and they usually always make big bucks. But this was just a really cool moment in history because for anyone that, I mean, Freddy Krueger is, in my opinion, like the best horror monster ever made, period. I can't think of one with better rules. And Jason is boring, but he has his own prestige, and there's a couple good Jason movies, and it's just really fun to see. Like, this movie doesn't take itself seriously at all. Like, to talk about the movie itself, it's not a horror movie at all. It's like a comedy adventure movie set in the universe of Freddy versus Jason. It's not trying to be scary at any point, really. I mean, there's occasional moments, right, where Freddy is doing his typical Freddy thing, and it would normally be scary. Except this movie is filled with a lot of humor that it doesn't feel like a horror movie. So take that as you will. The first half of this movie and the story that they set up in order to bring these characters together is genuinely interesting. And and yeah, the first half of this movie is incredible. The second half is like whatever, like most horror movies, but definitely worth a watch if you've ever listen. It's not a great. It's I give it a 5 out of 10, and even that might be a little generous, but it's definitely worth watching. It's a movie that's like, because there's so much comedy in it, it kind of like, I don't know. It's a movie that knows that it's not that great, so you don't have to like be bored by it necessarily, if that makes sense. All right, I'll talk about one or two more. Blair Witch. Oh God, who here remembers? Who here remembers the OG Blair Witch? Did you watch it when it came out? Did you care about it? Was it the scariest thing that you had ever seen? I specifically remember where I was the first time I watched the original Blair Witch. I was at Carlos's house, and it was kind of late at night. It was definitely dark outside, and we were probably it was probably freshman year of high school max. And um back then when you're a kid, it's really easy to buy into the whole um yeah. Yeah, well, that's just what I was going to say. Thank you. You know what? No, I remember specifically we watched this in your room. Um, it might have been pre-bunker or right around that time. It was honestly either eighth grade or freshman year of high school. It was a long time ago. And what I was gonna say is but when you're young and there's like marketing or there's like creepy pastas or stories or Slender Man, when there are these stories that like people online are like, oh, this might be real. When you're a kid, it's a lot easier to believe that it might be real. You don't even necessarily fully believe that it's real, but you definitely believe that it could be real. And that makes it scarier. And when the original Blair Witch came out, it took the nation by storm because it was marketed as things that actually happened. These were tapes that were actually found by people. And if you watch that movie going in pretty blind and you watch it, when it's dark out and you really try to get spooked by it, it's really really effective the first time you watch it. And then it's garbage after that. Rewatching the Blair Witch Project is so boring because in reality nothing happens and the whole movie is just characters screaming each other's names. Thanks, man. You're effective, bro. Thank you for joining, by the way. But yeah, dude, the Blair Witch, it's super boring after the first watch, but it's really good the first time. And this movie from 2016 is a soft reboot, so it's basically the same movie, but imagine like millennials with drones and like nicer cameras. So it's tough because it doesn't feel like a handheld movie anymore because like in today's world if this happened everyone would just be carrying around like 4K cameras, so it loses the authenticity aspect of it. Even though it's not real, like you still want it to like kind of look shitty. um and the beginning of it is the worst part of this version. The first act is is really horrendous. Um, and honestly, the original movie, the Blair Witch Project, the first act in that movie kind of sucks too because both of them are just people telling stories to the camera because it's like this documentary, right? Where like different people are like talking about like the legend of the Blair Witch, and it's supposed to like build this tension and this narrative, right? But it's really fucking bad in this movie. The first act, the first third of this movie is the worst part. But that being said, that means that the rest of the movie in my eyes is better. There's a moment at the start of the third act that is genuinely incredible, and the end of the movie has some really good spooky stuff which the first one doesn't. The original movie, sorry to spoil the original Blair Witch, but nothing really happens at the end. You don't see a monster, you don't even see another bad person, you don't see anything. And you don't need to see something for things to be spooky. A lot of horror movies are better when it's left mysterious. But that being said, um, I appreciated the spooky design at the end of this movie. That's all I'll say. I won't say too much, but there's some good stuff at the end of this, and it takes you out of the horror a little bit. Anytime you show too much in a horror movie or show anything, it does take away a little bit of the fear because that's not real. But um, that being said, for a movie like this that's like not that good anyway, I don't mind them throwing something like that at the end. You know what I mean? Like it's got to give you something. So 5 out of 10, it's fine. I don't know if I would recommend watching this one. Natalie, would you recommend watching Blair Witch 2016? Because I honestly don't. I could go either way on it. Crickets. All right. Not gonna talk about The Greatest Showman because I think it is just a whatever movie. This movie's not made for me. It's a whatever musical, slightly above average only because of production and performance. Not made for me. It's very whatever. It's an average movie that's produced well. And I don't know. I'll talk about the Suicide Squad and then I'm gonna hop off. All right. Um, this movie was really, it was really good. I don't think it was like mind blowing, but it didn't need to be. It just needed to be better than the original, which it was without a doubt better than the original. There's like no denying that. Um, I know some people that like Stockholm syndrome themselves into thinking that they like the original. They don't. No one likes the original. It's not a good movie. Um, it's it's like a good trailer. The original. It's got like good characters, but it has a nonsensical plot. Yeah, it's the original is the original is only worth watching if you want to watch a really bad movie. You know what I mean? Like it approaches, you know what it actually even is? It's one of those movies that's so bad that it's kind of funny. Um but it's so bad that it's also just like flat out boring, and the plot doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? Like they at least could have like a shitty plot that doesn't take any brain power, but it's it's a movie that clearly was reorganized like 5 times after they filmed it. And so the plot line has like just like blatant holes in it. And it's just there's so much wrong with that movie. Parts of it are hilarious. Jared Leto's performance of the Joker is hilariously bad, but he's only in it for like 5 minutes or something. So I'd recommend just googling a compilation of the Joker and call it a day. Um, this movie, to give some background, what happened was so you guys remember a few years ago when people dug up tweets that James Gunn had put out there like 20 years ago, and they got really pissed because he was making like really shitty jokes about like offensive things, like about like rape and some others, like just like dark humor. Like reading the tweets, it clearly he was trying to be funny, and back then people joked about those things more. But regardless, he deleted the tweets. He apologized for the tweets, but regardless, Disney canceled him. And it was this huge thing because it was not too long after Guardians of the Galaxy 2 had came out, maybe. And that's who James Gunn is, the director. James Gunn does Guardians of the Galaxy. That's kind of his baby. And it was like this huge thing because like multiple actors from the movie like came out and were like really pissed and said like I don't want to be in another Guardians movie without James Gunn. And it was like this huge, it sparked this big conversation where people were when do you draw the line of like forgiving people for things that they tweet, you know? And so James Gunn gets fired from Disney, and very shortly after that he signs a deal with DC. You know, he was with Marvel, and then DC snatches him up and asks him to make a sequel to Suicide Squad. And it's essentially like a soft reboot because um this movie doesn't address the first one in any way. In any way. There are 3 characters in this movie that are in the original, and they don't reference the events of the first movie at all. It's basically a reboot, but it's just we're just telling a different story. We're just trying again. It's not it's the same universe because it's the same Harley Quinn and it's the same military guy. Um, but it has nothing to do with the original. So James Gunn gets scooped up by DC, and obviously Marvel changed their mind and they hired James Gunn back. And so James Gunn gets the best of both worlds. He's gonna be making the next Guardians movie, and he just made out like a bandit. So James Gunn knows how to make a story about characters no one cares about. He knows how to do that. No one gave a shit about Guardians of the Galaxy. Everyone thought it was going to be a flop, and because it sounds silly and the characters look silly and the trailer looked whatever. And he managed to make a movie that was funny and people connected to it. And that's exactly what this franchise needed, because the whole plot line of this is that it's like random villains that you've never heard about and aren't that good. And he applies his magic. He knows how to make a movie about stupid characters with a stupid plot line, but um he's really good at creating genuine interactions between characters. Um and a really easy way to do that is to just make sure that each character has some sort of like solid interaction with every other character, So the shark guy and the polka dot guy have an interaction, but the shark guy also has an interaction with John Cena. And John Cena has an interaction with polka dot guy. Everyone kind of has an interaction with every other character at least once, so they feel more like a unit. Like it's a really easy, like, no duh, that's what you should do in a screenplay. You know what I mean? To make a ensemble movie, you want to make sure that all the characters are interacting with each other. But there are so many movies that don't do that. There's so many movies that focus on like two or three characters and how they interact with everyone, but like B character 1 and B character 2 might not ever actually talk to each other. And this movie just does a good job of kind of balancing the characters as much as possible. um, there are still main characters, obviously, but uh, yeah. That being said, Idris Elba is A+ in this. I've always kind of thought Idris Elba has been like waiting for like his breakthrough role. Or well, he was in The Wire, and The Wire was his breakthrough role. But I'm just saying, like, these days Idris Elba signs on for a lot of whatever projects, and I'm not saying this is his breakthrough role or anything, but I think he was really good in this, better than I've seen him in others, which is saying something. um Harley Quinn was completely unneeded in this movie. She's a remnant of the last film, and the only reason she's in this movie is to sell tickets. She gets separated from the main group for most of the movie, and everything that she does in her subplot has absolutely no bearing on the rest of the movie. So it's really, and then when she does link up with everyone, she hasn't spent time interacting with all the characters, and so she feels like an odd man out. She feels like a remnant of a previous movie. It doesn't feel like they cared about integrating her into a new group. They cared about having a couple scenes with her, because they knew that people wanted to see her because she sells tickets. So her plot line definitely bloated this movie. I really wish that they tried harder to integrate her into the main cast so that I didn't dislike her plot. But yeah, she's kind of the most boring part of the, and her stuff isn't that good. Like, I don't know, she just doesn't like, there are a lot of scenes in this movie that include her that are just kind of cringe. And maybe Harley Quinn is a cringe character, but it doesn't make it easier for me to watch. And so I just didn't. I thought the other female protagonist, this rat girl, I thought she was like way better. So I don't know. I think there are good ways to integrate a female character into a male movie. I mean, I'm just going to say it. This is a guy's movie. Most of the characters are dudes. It's a stupid action comedy. And if you're going to throw a female character in there, don't make her be a nuisance to the plot line. You know what I mean? I am completely okay with putting Harley Quinn in this movie and having her do her own thing and having her be cringe, because for plenty of other people, she probably wasn't that cringe. That's fine. But you need to at least make her worthwhile to the story, right? She doesn't do. You could delete her from this movie and it would have no impact. And I don't know. I think that's more troublesome. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe because I could see a flip side argument if I wanted to argue with myself. There's a flip side argument that says, when you put a woman in a movie, you should treat her the same as you would treat a man in a movie. And there are men characters that you could delete that and it wouldn't have an impact. You could delete Shark Guy and it would have no impact on the whole movie. And so maybe we shouldn't be afraid to treat women. Maybe not every woman has to be has to say something grand or has to you know make a statement to be same with any minority. Maybe they don't have to be a statement maker. Um, but that being said, um, I don't think that's a line that they ride very well with Harley Quinn because even in this movie, um, a lot of her scenes are kind of about her like her whole rebranding after Suicide Squad has been about like independence and being like an independent woman and like not wanting to rely on men and like disavowing toxic relationships. And those are all super positive messages. But if you're going to shove a character into a movie that preaches about those characters and then also doesn't do anything for the main plot, it just feels really disconnected. You have to, in some way, tie that into the plot line. So, she has to, you know what I mean? Otherwise, it just feels like bait. It just feels like ham fisted liberal bait and it doesn't feel genuine, you know? Whereas when Rat Girl has an influential, story and like an emotional story to tell, she's also having a big impact on the story. And so it in your brain it makes it feel more cohesive even when they do ham fist things because they do ham fist stuff with her too. So that's my take. I don't have a problem with her being in this movie. I just wish that because Margot Robbie is A+ at the role. She fits Harley Quinn perfectly, but they don't integrate her well, and as a result, this movie pushes past 2 hours, and action comedies don't need to be past 2 hours. So if you're not going to cut her plot line to short her B plot to shorten the movie, at least make it have an impact on the rest of the story. That's what I'll say about that. Also, Weasel is a character in this movie, and he is simultaneously the funniest and most horrifying character I've ever seen on film. So take that what you will. All right. Thank you for joining me for the first episode of I don't know. I think I'm gonna call this like recaps with Giros. I want to keep doing these. I'm thinking every Wednesday, just kind of get on the mic and just spit about stuff that I've been watching recently because like I said at the top of the episode, I really do feel like I watch more stuff than the average person and it feels like a waste to not use that. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, it just feels like a waste to not use this for content. You know what I mean? So, thank you everyone that did join me. This will go on VOD as well. So if you missed something, you can go back and listen to it. And yeah, thank you so much. Have a good night.